Today I would like to walk you through the Pear deck that you had available on Friday to work through as a review for the test. Your test will be tomorrow, and most of these slides will be questions that will be on the test tomorrow. So what might be helpful is if you take a moment, pause this, go back and open your Pear deck from Friday. So go to Friday's assignment last week. Click on that link, open your Pear deck. All of the answers that you put in should still be there. I've just left that up and running, so all of your answers should be available. So if you open this in one screen and open up a second screen, if you do Control N, that'll open up a second screen. So kind of a split screen going with this on one side and your Pear deck from last Friday in another window. And you should be able to follow along and look at the answers that you put for these questions and compare those with the correct answers as we talk through what the correct choices are so that you are prepared for the test tomorrow. So in the first slide, slide number 1, it says, one characteristic used to place organisms into kingdoms is. And I will have to open this up so that I can see your choices. Your choices were A, how they move, B, where they live, C, their ability to make food, D, their ability to reproduce. And the correct answer for this slide is C. One characteristic used to place organisms into kingdoms is C, their ability to make food. Slide 2. Organisms that make their own food are called, and if you remember, we had two groups of organisms based on if they made their own food or not. Those that make their own food are called autotrophs. So organisms that make their own food are called autotrophs. Slide number 3, which group of organisms includes only multicellular heterotrophs? See what your choices were. Which group of organisms includes only multicellular heterotrophs? Your choices were A, protists, B, bacteria, C, plants, or D, animals. The correct answer here is D, animals. It's the group of organisms that contains multicellular heterotrophs. Slide number 4 is true false. A horse is a heterotroph. Is that true or false? The answer is true. Remember, heterotrophs are organisms that rely on other organisms for their food. They don't make their own food. So a horse doesn't make its own food. It relies on eating other things, so it is then a heterotroph. The answer is true. Slide number 5, which is the broadest classification level? See what the choices were for you. Which is the broadest classification level? It tells us A, family, B, domain, C, phylum, or D, species. The most broad, which means the most general or has the most in it, the one at the top of that chart that was in our book, would be B, domain. So domain is the broadest classification level. Slide number 6. A blank consists of paired statements about the characteristics of different organisms. What is the tool that had paired statements? Remember, there was a 1A, 1B, and it told you to go someplace else. And there was a 3A, 3B, and you'd go someplace else, and then it would name. We used it in the alien activity that we had last week. And that is called a taxonomic key. A taxonomic key consists of paired statements about the characteristic of different organisms. Number 7. What is one way in which scientists get information about the evolutionary history of a species? Again, this is a true false. Let me look at your choices so I know the order. One way in which scientists get information about the evolutionary history of a species. Is it A, by comparing organisms' body structures, B, by observing where organisms live, C, by observing what organisms eat, or D, by studying how organisms move? The correct answer here is A, by comparing organisms' body structures. Slide number 8 is true/false. The scientific study of how organisms are classified is called binomial nomenclature. This statement is false. The scientific study of how organisms are classified is called taxonomy. Binomial nomenclature is the two-word naming system in which we give them their names, their scientific name. Slide number 9, which goes back to that very last one, or slide number 8, is what is taxonomy? This was a multiple choice. What is taxonomy? A, the scientific study of how living things are classified. The name of Aristotle's classification system. The process used by geologists to classify rocks. Or D, the process of observing an organism's behavior. And the correct answer here, like on the last slide, is A, the scientific study of how living things are classified. Slide number 10. The bones in the wing of a bat are similar to the bones in the flipper of a whale. This information suggests that bats and whales have a similar blank history. This would suggest that they have a similar evolutionary history. Similar structures we use to identify organisms as having similar evolutionary histories. Slide number 11. An organism's scientific name consists of... So how do we get the scientific name of an organism? Is it A, its class and family name, B, its kingdom and phylum name, C, its genus and species name, or D, its phylum and species name? The correct answer here is C. The scientific name of an organism is its genus and species name. Remember, genus is capitalized, species is lowercase, and the entire name is italicized. Slide number 12. Alligators and crocodiles are classified in the same order and therefore probably have different evolutionary histories. This is false. If they are in the same order, they probably have very similar evolutionary histories because they share that same, the same order name. 13. A plant grows toward the light. The plant's action is an example of... Your choices are A, reproduction, B, a response, C, a stimulus, or D, development. If it's growing toward the light, that means that it is B, a response. The light here would be the stimulus causing the reaction. The reaction of growing toward the light would be the response. So your answer for slide number 13 is response. Number 14, and we just talked about this a couple moments ago. The first word in an organism's scientific name is its genus. Its genus name comes first. Slide number 15. Spontaneous generation is a mistaken idea because living things A, exhibit binomial nomenclature, B, are produced only by living things, C, do not reproduce, or D, maintain homeostasis. Remember, spontaneous generation was that idea that living things could come from non-living things, that they just spontaneously appeared out of nowhere. This is a mistaken idea because B, they are produced only by living things. So the answer here is B. Slide number 16, true, false. Mushrooms, molds, and mildew are members of the fungi kingdom. The answer here is true. Molds, mildew, mushrooms are all fungi. Number 17. What contribution of Charles Darwin had a major impact on classification? Your choices are A, binomial nomenclature, B, taxonomy, C, 7 levels of classification, or D, his theory of evolution. Charles Darwin, major impact on classification is D, his theory of evolution. We specifically talked about natural selection in this chapter. Slide number 18. Who developed a naming system that grouped organisms on the basis of their observable features? So Darwin was the one we think about with theory of evolution. This person is the one who is responsible for binomial nomenclature, or naming the groups of organisms. And that is Linnaeus. Now, I don't expect that you're going to be able to spell that tomorrow on the test. I believe this will be a multiple choice on the test. So Carolus Linnaeus is the one who was responsible for naming or coming up with the system for naming organisms. Linnaeus, Linnaeus. Which kingdoms include both unicellular and multicellular organisms? Look at our choices. Only one set of these contain both unicellular and multicellular organisms. Is it A, fungi and plants, B, fungi and protists, C, protists and animals, D, protists and plants? The correct answer here is B. Fungi and protists are the kingdoms that include both unicellular and multicellular organisms. Number 20. Archaea and bacteria are two domains of eukaryotes. Remember when we talked about eukaryotes and prokaryotes. Eukaryotic cells are cells that have a true nucleus, and they have membrane-bound organelles like the mitochondria and endoplasmic reticulum and the vacuoles. Prokaryotes do not have a true nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. So this statement, because archaea and bacteria do not have a true nucleus, would be false. Archaea and bacteria would be prokaryotes. Slide number 21. Which of the organisms in the table is least similar to the others? So what you should have done here was to look at the full name, the full categorization of these different organisms. We're trying to find the one that is the least similar. So all of these organisms are in the Animalia kingdom. All of them are chordata. All of them are mammals. This next step down, we see that all of them are carnivores except for the blue whale. So since the blue whale has a different order, that means that it is the least similar to the others. All of these, the aardwolf, the gray wolf, the coyote, the lion, would be more similar than the blue whale because they have a different order. Slide number 22. Which of the organisms in the table is most similar to a tiger? They tell us here that the scientific name is Panthera tigris, or Panthera tigris, whichever, of a tiger. Panthera tigris is tiger. So what we do is come up here and look at genus names to see if any share the same genus name. So if we look at the genus and we come over and we see that the lion is in the genus Panthera. So the organism in the table that is most similar to the tiger would be the lion because it shares the same order or same genus name. Slide number 23. Is the gray wolf more closely related to the aardwolf or the coyote? And explain your answer. So let's look at the gray wolf. We're comparing it to the aardwolf and the coyote. They all three are Animalia. They're all three chordata. All three are Mammalia. All three are carnivore. However, in the next step down, we see that both the gray wolf and the coyote are in the same order of Canidae. The aardwolf sort of splits off there. So the gray wolf would be more closely related to the coyote because they share the same family name. Suppose you are using a taxonomic key to identify this organism. What are two physical characteristics you might examine? This goes back to the taxonomic key that we did in the book, looking at the animals. So there are lots of different answers you could have put for this. You could look for body segment. You could look for the number of legs. You could look for the segments on the legs. You could look whether there's hair or no hair on the body of the spider. So you could, there's lots of different things that you could use here. So this would be an example like with the alien taxonomic key or the one we did with the bugs. 1A might say 2 body segments and 1B might say 1 body segment. And you would know to go then to 2. And it might say, 8 legs or 6 legs. So those are, any physical characteristic you could have put down for this. Alrighty, so that takes us to the end of the review. All of these questions will be in some format on the test tomorrow that you will take. So hopefully you looked at your answers as we went through this to see what you put. And if you got one wrong, hopefully you know why it was wrong and you can correct that tomorrow on the test. Alrighty, see you later.